Well, I was working on the first draft of this new video, and I had a deer walk by my car. It scared the shit out of me. It's kind of a nice surprise once I figured out what it was. So, anyway, try this again. Um, I'm sitting here just thumbing through the internet because, well, lack of anything better to do, reading the news, and coming across a few articles that Chris Cornell's family, this Fox News is reporting that Chris Cornell's family thinks that his suicide may have been drug related, and it's also coming out that he said as far back as 1994 that he's struggled with substance abuse issues, and that, well, I'm not surprised at that. I'm really, musicians, drugs, get it. You live the rock and roll lifestyle. You're gonna party like the rock and roll lifestyle, and I guess Chris Cornell was no exception. It just so, and that kind of ties in with the reason why I'm making this video, because I want to also talk about right now is how substance abuse and depression kind of go hand in hand, and I'd like to open this conversation by talking about my uncle. And before I do, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that there are two people on my Facebook friends list who are my cousins. So this is their father I'm talking about. But I also want to say that what I'm about to say about him isn't news to them. We've known this for a long time. It was no secret. Everybody knew. So, and I'm not going to say anything negative about him because really, there isn't anything negative to say about my uncle. He was by all accounts a good man. His drug of choice was alcohol, and yeah, it was no secret. He drank quite a bit, a lot. We all knew he did. The whole family knew it. That was just, we just kind of left him to his own devices because that's just basically what my uncle did. He drank. But his years of drinking, well, he got to a point to where he was no longer drinking to get drunk. He was drinking to maintain, and that is the classic definition of an alcoholic, which eventually that's what he turned into. But again, he was still a good man, and I haven't a cross word to say about him. I loved him very much, and I was really sad to see him go the way he did. Um, I know, it was evident from the start that drinking was, his life pretty much revolved around it, and sometimes he got into trouble for it. There was one case in particular where he was pulled over one night, coming out of the bar, I believe, and when the cop ordered him to get out of the car, he got out and promptly fell into the cop's arms. And he was rather fond of telling that story. So, and for his trouble, he ended up spending a night in Santa Rita County Jail. And in fact, he was so drunk that the next day, when they took his blood alcohol level again, it was still twice the normal limit. So, he was a pretty heavy drinker. But looking back on his life, it seemed that, well, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not really in the habit of diagnosing anybody. I really couldn't diagnose them. I'm not qualified to do that. But based on what I saw, and basically on what I saw, he had all the hallmarks of clinical depression. It's just that was just the way it was. It was obvious that his depression caused him to drink. And in the end, he did suffer some health problems down the road because of his drinking. The first one was he had to have angioplasty, the whole shoot match there, and well, the doctors told him after the procedure that he had to quit drinking, and he managed to hang on for about a month until he got the shake so bad from alcohol withdrawal that he went right back to drinking again. He was pretty miserable about it. That was his crutch, you know. So at that point, it ceased to be a crutch. Now this was something he grew a dependency to, and then there was the beginning of the end came around late 2001, 2002, when he collapsed in a supermarket, and it seemed like he may have had a stroke, but what it turned out to be was a brain tumor that was pushing through a section of his brain and was slowly killing him. And the night before the beginning of the end, before he went into the hospital for the last time and never came back out again, was he drank 2 cases of beer. He drank a case of Coors and 2 pints of Captain Morgan Spice rum by himself. I know that, and I told the doctor that, and I could hear over the phone, the doctor's jaw hit the floor. I mean, that was just, he was taken aback by that, and he asked me, would you characterize your uncle as someone who has a drinking problem? And I had to honestly answer, no, I would pretty much characterize my uncle as someone who was an alcoholic, because that was basically it. That was the truth of the matter. And my grandmother, I talk about how denial is a powerful thing. My own grandmother considered everybody else in the family to have a serious drinking problem / alcoholism, except the one person who actually had the serious drinking alcoholism problem, and that was my uncle. And there was a point in my life when I thought I was headed the same way he was, and so I actually went out and talked to somebody about it. And one of the things there's a battery of questions. Some of the things they asked me were, because of alcohol, have you ever missed work? No, I've come into work extremely hungover on several occasions. Have you ever gotten into trouble with the law because of alcohol? Well, at the time I hadn't, so no. I mean, later on I did get a DUI, and which I managed to get talked down to a wet reckless, and didn't lose my license. Because I had a pretty good lawyer. But that was my uncle. It was depression that caused him to drink. He had it. I mean, it was obvious, and even to me now, but at the time I didn't realize it. But it's a tell when somebody, takes to drugs and alcohol, that there's something going on there, and it's not something you should ignore. So if you know anybody, or you yourself are doing drugs and alcohol, drinking a lot, you might want to talk to somebody about that. You might want to seek some help, because if you don't become suicidal because of your depression, what will happen, like my uncle, is that you'll continue to drink, because of your depression, and that which will in the end cause you health problems, which will eventually kill you. And that's pretty much the way it went.